And one day, the world was suddenly destroyed. When mankind was about to perish along with their home, a clockworker suddenly appeared. He arbitrarily operated and restored the world with gears, and that world has continued to exist for thousands of years. And people have called the world created from countless gears, Clockwork Planet, to the present day. We meet Naoto, an eccentric person with a strong passion for gears and clocks. Naoto's room is filled with clocks, and he is slightly impatient because he can't fix any of the clocks here, but he believes that at some point, he will become a professional clockworker and be able to fix all the friends here. Naoto is quite interested in the mechanical dolls of the present age, and he wishes that one day he could create a mechanical doll with his own hands. He wants to make it play a rain of gears or something. And suddenly a large box fell straight down to Naoto's house, destroying all the clocks he had collected for a long time, making Naoto very angry. But he tried to look through the box and then opened it, and suddenly there was a girl inside, at the same time a shipping company. We meet Mary, a famous genius who is questioning the manager here for losing an important item. And that item is a national-level mechanical doll. Mary then asked her adjutant to send a team to recover the item because she didn't believe the manager could do anything. Most people just fill her with work, instead of finding a real solution. Naoto now thinks that the girl in front of him is a mechanical doll. And this will be the embodiment of his ideal. Or maybe even more. Naoto has a pair of hands that are very good at hearing the slightest sounds. Naoto listened to the sound of the gears inside the mechanical girl, and found that there was a small error inside, which made the girl unable to operate even though she was running. He didn't have much time before the place completely collapsed, so Naoto had to try to fix the girl. Naoto then opened the body of the doll, and was not confident whether he could do it or not, because he couldn't even fix a clock. In the meantime, Mary Kia has arrived at the main tower of this city to repair something here. She met the professor who had been called here before her, and soon after, the army also arrived. Mary asked them not to interfere with her and the doctor's work. Because the army couldn't fix it, they needed them. Naoto was quite worried at this time. Because he just needs to make a mistake and break a component, it's like asking to fix it again. He then successfully opened the heart, and immediately found where the gem was. Naoto was quite hesitant, but in the end, he successfully operated the screw, and let the doll work again. Naoto then collapsed from exhaustion. The dollhouse began to collapse, and the mechanical girl quickly rushed to pick up Naoto. She then took Naoto to safety, and introduced herself as Ryuzu. She was grateful that Naoto had fixed her, but she was still a little disappointed that Naoto took so long for a small mistake. But she still accepted Naoto as her master, and hoped that he would be a special person. Naoto was also quite tired and fell asleep. When he woke up again, he found himself lying on Ryuzu's lap. He was startled, but Ryuzu asked him if he liked her plan. He didn't know exactly how many gears were in her. All he knew was based on the sound, so Ryuzu judged him to be the best clockworker in the world, and regarded him as her new master. But he didn't think he was the best, and was a little hesitant to accept Ryuzu as his own, because he would be silenced by the government. But Ryuzu was still better than those far away, so he decided to become her master. She then took Naoto's hand and made a vow to him. In the meantime, Mary noticed that the army was quite impressive just now, so the professor asked one of his subordinates, Karasa, to investigate what the army was plotting. In the meantime, since Naoto no longer had a place to live, Ryuzu had to find a temporary place to live with Naoto. She took Naoto to the Love Hotel area, because it was private and cheap enough for them to stay. And if Naoto had any other intentions, she would be ready to respond. But suddenly 3 thugs came looking for Ryuzu. Naoto had to join hands to change them, and was provoked by them. Ryuzu was grateful for Naoto's actions and decided to join hands to teach the thugs a lesson. The two then went to a coffee shop to drink and spend the night. Ryuzu let Naoto lie on her lap and drink, and Ryuzu also wondered why Naoto regarded a doll like her as an ordinary girl. But Naoto fell asleep, leaving Ryuzu wondering what Naoto thought of her. That night, both Mary and Naoto suddenly heard a noise, and woke up. But Naoto went back to sleep, while Mary quickly ran to meet the doctors, and learned that something had just happened to the power system. If it is not repaired in time, the entire Kaido will collapse. But Karasada came and announced that the army had come up with another solution, which was that the army would abandon the city. Whoever evacuates in time will live, otherwise the entire city and the 200,000 people here will die. Even the best clockworkers can't create something that works forever. Someone capable enough to maintain it is needed for this world to function forever. Mary then returned to the guild to ask for help again. The man in the army came to see Mary and thought she wouldn't be able to change anything. But she knocked him down, put a gun to his face, and said that she would rely on everything and take everyone away. Ryuzu and Naoto were having breakfast at this time, and Naoto seemed to have heard some noises last night. He knew that there might be a fault somewhere below the city. After talking about the location of the fault, Ryuzu guessed that the fault was on the 20th floor. Because she and this world were both created by the legendary clockworker. Why? And it's funny that he could create this world but couldn't fix her for more than 200 years. Mary used the guild's radio system to inform the entire city of the incident and evacuate. The guild received a call from Mary and knew that something important had happened. She asked the person on the other end of the line to forward her call to the head of the department. However, looking at this guy's face, it seems that he also plans to abandon the entire city. Mary then called the professor's side because she had determined where the fault was. But the professor said that in order to reach the 20th floor, she had to repair something on the 15th floor before she could get to the 20th floor. The professor needs a few hours to repair the 15th floor, but Mary thinks it will be faster if they repair the faulty mainspring here. But Hanto thinks she doesn't intend to jump into the area after 30,000 meters to fix it. That is, Mary really thinks so. Naoto is now going to school with Ryuzu. He noticed that everyone was paying attention to him because he was with a beautiful girl like Ryuzu. But Naoto also wondered what Ryuzu would do while he was at school. She said that she had her own way of dealing with it. Naoto was then very surprised when Ryuzu also decided to enroll in the same school as him. Ryuzu said bluntly that she had no intention of ending up with ordinary people, and that she was Naoto's plaything. He was misunderstood by the whole class, so he quickly defended himself. Mary and Hanto were now following the pipeline, and found the room to repair the mainspring. But the Anning robots were here to stop them. Hanto took Mary straight to the area that needed to be repaired. She conveniently repaired a few robots along the way, and then let Hanto cover her. She only needs 40 wires, so Hanto should try his best. Hanto easily blocked and crushed the robots, so the larger robot had to come out. It targeted Mary, and Hanto had to step in to block the attack. Mary had gotten the gears working again, so Hanto used the momentum to send the robot flying. There was just one final problem to fix, but the robots kept interrupting. Fortunately, the professor called to say he could guide her through the final fix. The system was back up and running, so Mary and Hanto headed back down, taking out more robots as they went. I had skipped school because all you did today was throw insults and hateful glares at the assembly. Rio said that he didn't care what the underlings thought of him. Rio also noted that the planet hadn't changed much in the past 1,000 years. Even a planet that's 5,000 years old needs maintenance. Meanwhile, Mary and the doctors had made it to the 20th floor. The problem was that they didn't know exactly where the fault was, and even narrowing it down, there were still over 500 million parts to check. They had just over 9 hours before the city would flood, and if the evacuation was announced too early, the military would lock down the city to keep the civilians quiet. Suddenly, Hanto arrived to inform Mary that the guild had ordered them to stand down. Mary and Hanto were forced to leave. But Mary was still going to find a way to save the people, and not let the city flood. She wished that she had Ryudu here. Things would be different. Meanwhile, Naoto was out with Ryudu. She had taken Ryudu to a clothing store to try on clothes, and she found that Ryudu looked beautiful in the different outfits. Naoto felt like this was like a date, which made Ryudu think that she was willing to date a machine like her. But Naoto didn't see her as just a machine. She then accidentally fell on Ryudu, making her think that she had planned this all along to trick her. Mary was furious that she had been forced off the job of saving the city. If she didn't comply, her guild license would be revoked, and she would never be allowed to step foot in the tower again. She knew that the mayor and the military were in cahoots. She wanted to shoot him, but Honda stopped her and told her to go. Mary knew that the military hated her, so this was their way of blaming her and making her suffer. She then turned and punched Hanto in the face. Hantu asked her to calm down and she did, deciding to go find another way to save the people. Ryudu and Naoto then suddenly arrived. Ryudu wanted Naoto to fix his nagging personality and brought him here. Just then, Mary and Hantu came out. As they passed each other, Mary suddenly recognized Ryu. The two parties then sat down to talk. Mary explained that she was a member of the guild, and the badge she was wearing was proof of her membership. It allowed her to go anywhere she had authority and fix anything she wanted. She also explained that Ryudu belonged to her faction, and she wanted her back. Naoto would be rewarded if he complied, but he refused, saying that Ryudu belonged to him now. Mary didn't want to waste any more time, so she told Hantu to fix Naoto and take Ryudu back, but Hantu told her to stand down. Mary quickly realized that her neck could be snapped at any moment. Ryudu was ready to fight, so Hantu pointed his gun at Naoto, and they had to stop to talk again. Ryudu stated plainly that she would only serve Naoto. Ryudu also said that there was someone who could fix the problem that Mary was having. Naoto suddenly grabbed Ryudu and ran off, and an earthquake immediately followed. Mary thought that the military had started to flood the city, but that didn't seem to be the case. Mary then asked Naoto how he had known about the fault, and he said that he just knew. Mary didn't understand how he could hear it, even with noise-canceling headphones. The location of the fault was also 7 km away. Ryudu said that it was no problem. Naoto's ability to hear the fault had kept her asleep for over 200 years. So she believed that Naoto could fix the city. Mary asked if Naoto could pinpoint the exact location of the fault, but he couldn't tell where it was from here. So Mary decided to take him to the 20th floor to pinpoint it. But Naoto said that Mary was currently surrounded by enemies. He didn't want to risk taking her. So Ryudu gave Naoto the motivation to go. His sister was in the basement of the main tower. Ryudu described his sister, and Naoto was intrigued, so he agreed to go. Mary said that if the military found out about their plan they would definitely stop them, so they needed to go now. But Naoto said that the military had already found out. He had overheard that there were a lot of military robots waiting for them outside. Naoto wanted to go with Ryudu to take care of them. But Mary said that would cause a war between the guild and the military. Naoto didn't care because he wasn't going to play politics with her. Mary realized that she was just a pawn and didn't need to worry about the politics. Mary then told Hantu to take care of the robots outside. Naoto then took off his headphones to listen to the location of the fault, and then led Hantu and Mary to take care of the robots. Naoto learned that Hantu was a cyborg, and had been created by Mary's clan with the utmost care. After taking care of the regular robots, Naoto noticed a giant one standing in front of them. The mayor of the guild was shocked to hear that Mary was dead. He was worried that if Mary's clan found out that she had died at the hands of the guild and the opposing clan, there would be a major incident. But Mary had recorded the conversation and was ready to expose everything. Mary had to fake her death so that her path forward would no longer be blocked. But Naoto was just excited about how Ryudu had taken care of the giant robot. Mary then broke the guild's seal and pretended to be dead so that she could act freely from now on. The group then set off for the main tower. But as they were walking, Ryudu suddenly grabbed Naoto and threw him into the street. A cannonball then flew past. Mary thought that Ryudu was trying to kill them all, but Ryudu said that she had just saved him. They then encountered the main tower's defense team, and Ryudu stepped forward and was angry that they had pointed their guns at Naoto. Ryudu then activated her special ability. And as strong as Ryudu was, she was still the youngest of her sisters. She then transformed from her normal mode to her armor mode. To everyone else, it would only be a few seconds, but to her, it would be 3 hours. Time then seemed to stop, and only a second later the robots were suddenly cut down, and a bright light appeared. Ryudu then walked over to Naoto, who had been waiting for her, and saw that she had simply run out of energy. Hantu and Mary came over and carried them both inside. Naoto began to fix Ryudu, and Mary explained that Ryudu's ability had allowed her to enter a time warp, a place where she could fight without their time being affected. Ryudu then woke up, and Naoto fixed her up and asked if Ryudu would follow him. Ryudu said that he should reconsider his position. Mary didn't understand why Naoto would say something like that, and he said that he just blurted it out. And now Naoto thought that their relationship would be just master and servant. Han too noted that Ryudu didn't seem like the kind of machine that would follow orders. Ryuru didn't think she was on the same level as those things. She wasn't the type to follow orders unconditionally, and only exist to satisfy her master. She really did like Naoto. Naoto didn't expect Ryuru to have feelings, so he listened to Ryuru's confession, and began to ask her if she really liked him, and wasn't being forced by some power. The reason she refused Naoto was because she believed that when she became his wife, she would be on the same level as her master. And that was not allowed. As Naoto asked how much she liked him, Ryuru nodded repeatedly, making Naoto very happy to be alive. Mary couldn't accept that the two of them were using this serious time for romance. After walking for a while, Hanta realized that there was no one here. Naoto heard a noise behind this door. Hanta pulled out his gun and prepared to fire, but inside were all the doctors who had not evacuated because they had decided to follow Mary to the end. If they failed, they would perish with this city. But Mary gave them good news that she had a way to save the situation. And that solution was Naoto, who was fumbling with the gears here, making Ryuru seem cunning. Naoto was flustered, and quite flustered just to coax his wife to stop. The doctors also saw him being so flustered that they began to doubt Naoto's ability. Mary thought Ryu was a fool, but Naoto was the fool they needed right now. She then reminded Naoto about the main issue, so he went upstairs to listen. Naoto laughed and started listening. When he was done listening, Ryuru was also allowed to go down. Naoto said there were 4,000 errors, but only 12 were critical. The doctors fixed the most recent errors. Ryuru was asked to fix the smaller but harder to reach errors. The trio of Naoto, Hunter and Mary would fix the rest. Hunter wanted Naoto to look at Mary's hand, because she was a genius like Naoto. After fixing everything, they were all happy because they had succeeded. And the one who apologized to Naoto for doubting his ability. They let Naoto know that he had just saved billions of lives, but the crisis continued at this moment. The reason was that the military had arbitrarily activated the force field to bring the entire city down. Mary figured out a way to reverse the force field, which required Ryuru's heart. Of course, Naoto strongly objected. But Mary said she only promised to return Ryuru after she was revived. Naoto still didn't accept, so Ryuru took out her own heart for Mary to use, because she knew that if this city was destroyed, Naoto would also be in danger. And to keep Naoto safe, she agreed to do it, and put her trust in Mary. At this moment, the military was rejoicing that the purge was about to be carried out, but the entire city was suddenly pushed back up, so they sent robots to destroy Mary's group. Mary, at this time, let Naoto know that she could hold the city for less than 30 more minutes, so she would soon return Ryuru to Naoto. Naoto said that he could hear the sound of the military robots outside, so Hanta went to do what he was best at, which was to stall. Hanta brought 3 guards outside, and the professor also wanted to help Han too. He threw the writing cases, causing the gears above and below to fall. Han was surprised that he had done this much, so he said he would fix it later. In the meantime, Mary wanted Naoto to concentrate and show her which way to turn the gears. The entire city was then completely pushed up, but Ryuru's heart suddenly started beating abnormally. Mary couldn't find a way to stop it, so Naoto took a chance and reached out to take the heart down. Mary then sat down to concentrate on fixing the gears, while Han and the professor finished their work and returned. Mary was having a hard time putting it back together, so Naoto replaced her to continue fixing the gears. And after a while, Ryuru woke up. The two were overjoyed and married, and Ryuru felt for the first time that meeting Naoto was destiny. And the next day, a mass wedding of Mary's followers took place. Mary was now officially free, so she wanted to travel the world with Naoto to fix the gears and restore the world. But Naoto was still depressed because he hadn't found Ryuru's sister. Mary told him to follow her because one day she would lead him to find her. In the meantime, a group of half-human, half-machine beings infiltrated a certain facility and were intercepted and killed by a mechanical robot. The last one only managed to crawl a little further when he revealed the horrifying truth that there was a giant weapon here. Back to Mary. Died. She still couldn't leave because Naoto had to study to finish the test. He heard a strange sound, and then Mary came in. She said someone had transmitted illegal information, and she knew Naoto had heard it too. Naoto said the direction he heard it from, and Mary narrowed down the location of the informant. Naoto wanted to know what the information was about. Ryo-yu didn't need to know what the information was, but only that Mary dared to sit on Naoto and had to be punished. Ryo-yu picked Mary up and dropped her hard. Honda gave the details of the intercepted message, which was a hoax message aimed directly at Mary. Ryo-yu heard this and wanted Mary to handle it herself because they were targeting her. Honda whispered to Naoto that there was a beach there, so he could see Ryo-yu in a different way. Naoto was more interested, so he decided to go. When they got there, Mary let the whole group go to the beach first. Naoto took the opportunity to take a few pictures of Ryo-yu and then tripped over her in a very coincidental way. Ryo-yu let Naoto advance, but she held back to keep the rest of them out of this. Ryo-yu jumped down to pick him up. She was about to give Naoto mouth-to-mouth resuscitation when Mary ran over and slapped Naoto repeatedly in the face, causing him to wake up whether he wanted to or not. That night, the group walked around the city and noticed that there wasn't a single person in sight. Hanta also noticed that the place was like a ghost town. There was no wind either, and Naoto couldn't hear anything here. He also said that the clock tower over there was still standing, and there was no sound inside. Mary didn't think it made sense because the clock tower and the main tower of the city had to be operating for the whole city to be stable. And what Naoto had just said about the city still being stable was quite contradictory. But Naoto suspected that there might be a mechanical robot here like Ryo-yu powering the town. Ryo-yu also thought this was possible, and that this place might be hiding something, so the transfer of illegal information became possible. Mary then decided to go to the information source. The group entered a factory and many robots had been destroyed here. Mary wanted to make sure there was nothing here. Entering a room, the group found a hole in the middle of the floor that was definitely quite deep. Naoto heard something below, so Mary decided to go down and check it out. Ryo-yu gave Naoto a ride, and Hanta also jumped down with Mary. Hanta said he had a bad feeling. Mary also realized this, and when the group went down, they found a robot part that had been destroyed like the hole above. Hanta thought that this deep hole had sent a signal to her. Naoto told Mary to look this way. Mary fired a flare and saw a giant weapon of mass destruction below. Naoto said that all the components of the city were in here. Mary was not happy because she had to risk her life to protect the city, but someone wanted to use the city to create a weapon of mass destruction to destroy the world again. Mary decided to destroy it when a mechanical robot appeared. Ryo-yu said this was her sister, Anko, but this Anko was quite strange. She self-activated her special ability to fight the group in order to protect this weapon. Naoto said that she could use her special ability, and if she was lucky, she could win. Hantu only needed to make Anko's mind uncontrollable, and Ryo-yu could destroy her as well. Naoto and Ryo-yu then had to dodge continuously. Hanta asked Naoto if he had figured out a way to deal with it. Ryo knew that if she used her special ability, she might be able to win if she was lucky. Hantu only needed to make Anko's undead body uncontrollable, and Ryo could destroy her as she wished. Naoto wondered if he had come up with a way to deal with it. Ryo knew that if there was a chance of success, they would do it. Anko suddenly turned to attack Hantu, so Naoto warned Mr. Netty. Anko also took out her sword at this time. Hantu kept firing, and had Mary swing up high while he rushed over to throw a grenade. They caused the ground beneath Anko to collapse, but she still managed to jump up. Anko fired a pink beam. With just one shot, Anko blew up dozens of walls. She then aimed straight at Hantu. This shot was not good, so Ryo rushed over and stabbed the gear, rendering the cannon useless. Ryo and Naoto were also pushed to the edge of the pit. Anko placed the sphere right where they were standing, causing Naoto and Ryo to fall down. Mary and Hantu then had to retreat. Mary couldn't accept it, so Hanta told her that it was the same down there as it was outside the city. Without protective gear, they wouldn't survive. Mary blamed herself for dragging Naoto in and getting him killed, but she had no intention of giving up. She went to see a city executive next door and threatened him into telling her the origin of the annihilation machine down there. He didn't dare say it, so Mary threatened his family. He said that the creators were the doctors of the other city. In fact, the other city had once been a city of order, and it was considered illegal because order would cause the gears to be damaged. But when the mission failed, the government decided to destroy the entire city and abandon the doctors there. They helped to perfect this war machine. He also knew about it, and the government also intended to destroy his city, so he used that weapon as a door to protect the city until now. But Mary wondered why something that threatened the government was allowed to operate and be ready to be brought out and used. But even he didn't know. So when he heard about this, he knew that his city was probably coming to an end. The government received the information transmitted by Mary Lan and secretly activated the weapon to target his city. He was sure that Mary was responsible for the millions of people who were about to die. Mary liked to walk in the rain, and Hantu said that it wasn't her fault but the government's. While wondering what to do, Naoto suddenly climbed up from the sewer. Mary ran over and hugged Naoto because he was still alive and hadn't told her, while waiting for her. Naoto said that he and Ryo had fallen into an underground city below and met a crazy old man there, and also learned about the fake order here. Mary thought that Naoto had jumped down for her, but from the beginning, Naoto just wanted to get his appetite back, and he wanted to stop the war that was about to break out again. Mary didn't dare because she was worried that the city would become a battlefield. But Naoto wanted her to stop being timid and running away like an idiot. But Mary wasn't sure because she didn't have any plans that she could use. Naoto thought that it was better to act without a plan than to sit in a corner and cry and regret not doing anything. Mary finally had to give in to Naoto's stubbornness. So she went up with Naoto. She would stop the war, and Naoto would get his appetite back, and then they all agreed and went to the city together. As soon as the new day began, Naoto suddenly appeared in front of the people, and declared that he would disrupt their lives. In other words, he was going to commit terrorism. Naoto immediately had the Tokyo Tower blown up right in front of the people and made it shatter instantly. The people started to panic, and then several other explosions occurred. Back to 3 days ago. Mary knew that the weapon would use the underground passage to get to Tokyo and attack. But if they got to Tokyo first and evacuated the people, they would be able to limit the casualties. The best way to evacuate was to take over the Tokyo network and pretend to be terrorists in order to get the people to leave. By then, the army and the weapon would be free to fight in an empty city. However, the plan was quite difficult to carry out because the security in Tokyo was very good, and they didn't have enough manpower or time. Mary reminded Naoto that she had a lot of good friends out there. Mary then went to see the bishop and the doctors to get them to help. Ryuto then called and told Mary that the army was full of idiots, and that Mary's trap was too easy. Mary felt guilty for making the bishop leave the association and lose his job. But he didn't care because he didn't want to stay in the association anymore. Because if he did, how could he participate in Mary's brilliant plan? A plan that could take over the clock tower, the place that controlled all the functions of the city, and also take over the main tower where the Knot headquarters were located. Mary was then praised by the bishop for a few sentences, then blushed and bowed. She left the rest to them to handle. Mary then went to join forces with Naoto. He heard that 2 transport helicopters and a transport plane were coming, and that 12 army robots were about to be dropped. Hantu and Mary worked together to deal with 2 of them. The rest were all dealt with by Ryuto in one move. Naoto realized that the army was concentrating on dealing with the weapon, so they could be safe here. Mary and Naoto would also officially split up here. Mary and Hantu would go and take control and wait for Naoto at the safe house. He and Ryuto would go and deal with Anko, but Ryuto suddenly asked Mary to go with him. She and Naoto had come up with a plan to defeat Anko, and this method required Mary. Ryuto also bowed to Mary, so Mary agreed to go with him. Although Mary didn't think she could do anything to deal with Anko. But if her going with him could make defeating Anko smoother, then she would do it. The 3 of them then went to a parking lot together, and Naoto believed that Anko would come because Anko would want Ryuto to destroy her. Anko did indeed come later, but Ryuto asked Anko if she could say no. Because her master had decided that defeating Anko was certain, she would also seriously fight Anko again in the way of a sister. The 2 sides then transformed and officially entered the time gap. Anko resisted and attacked Ryuto. Ryuto realized that Anko was constantly getting into the time gap, and was likely to destroy it. However, the power that held the 2 together was the calendar, because Anko was created to fight. But that difference wouldn't always be the deciding factor. Anko then used the sphere to escape the restraint and forced Ryuto to retreat. But when fighting, she had told Naoto that she would definitely lose if she confronted Anko head-on. But one of her goals was to just remove Anko's mask. Knowing that this would still be difficult for Ryuto, Naoto told her to just use him as a shield. And of course, Ryuto refused, because she didn't want Naoto to be in danger just because of her sister. Anko then used the sphere to absorb the entire time network. Ryuto had to give up one of her own gears to stop the suction. She still decided to listen to Naoto's method, that he had no intention of dying. Because he believed that Anko wouldn't attack humans. Because in the previous encounter he had noticed that Anko hadn't targeted him or Mary. But Ryuto didn't want to jump to conclusions like that and put his life in danger. But now, Ryuto decided to believe in Naoto. She tried to fly back to Naoto, even though Anko followed. Anko rushed over, and Ryuto immediately dodged to let Mary appear in front of Anko. Anko stopped urgently, causing the gears to jam. Ryu put the mask in front of her face and carried Anko back. Naoto was right about Anko trying her best to resist the mask's control. Naoto and Mary then ran to check on her, and saw that she was okay. Naoto gave Ryu some water, and Mary was surprised that Ryu was still okay with the plan to use Naoto as a decoy. Ryu also thanked Mary for coming along to protect her. Naoto then noticed that the mask seemed to be done with them for now, and they should head back to Antorin's house to check on Anko. Anko then woke up to see that she was in a room full of toys. Anko remembered that this place looked like the place she was born. When she woke up, Anko saw Naoto's group again, and surprisingly called Naoto and Mary her parents. Naoto told her that she could just call him Oni-chan if she wanted. But calling him Papa was fine too. She then went to Mary, which made Mary a little scared, since she was a terrifying weapon just a few days ago. Ryu then asked Anko if she had a master yet. If not, she could consider Naoto as her master, and she started to form a contract with Naoto, and asked him a question. After forming the master-servant contract, Anko started acting like a child again, so Naoto told Anko to unlock her will control system. He wanted Anko to do whatever she wanted freely. Because she wasn't a weapon but a normal girl, whose duty was to protect her master, and also a cute girl. Anko started to cry, and believed that she wouldn't have to destroy anything anymore. Meanwhile, the crazy old man that Naoto met underground was the one controlling that giant weapon from the very beginning, and the one who found the 5 energies that created the world. They reached the bottom of the sanctuary to refine the land, but it was suddenly destroyed, and history was rewritten. This giant weapon was just a toy of a chaotic god, and humans were nothing but puppets. And if this world was just a joke to the sanctuary, then did the world that humans lived in really exist? Meanwhile, Ryo thought that Naoto seemed determined to take Anko in, and thought that he might be a lolicon, but Naoto said that he just saw Anko as a cute daughter, and there was nothing wrong with a father loving his daughter. Ow. Anko's ring then suddenly popped out the head of a robot that she had attacked before. Hanta then came back and saw that Mary was trying to revive the head. Hanta also asked Anko how she felt about attacking humans, and Naoto said that Anko never intended to do that. Because basically, mechanical robots all had a program to prevent them from attacking humans. Suddenly Naoto heard something from underground and the shaking started to happen again. Naoto realized that the weapon was coming up from underground. Mary thought that the army had already taken care of it. But the robot head said that if the army had taken care of it, then Anko wouldn't have gotten that message. Anko said that the weapon could use magnetism, and it was the most advanced weapon in terms of magnetism research that had ever appeared. The weapon then came up to the surface, and released a magnetic wave throughout the city. All the technology in the city was disabled. Ryo and Anko both collapsed and stopped moving. Naoto's hearing aid was also broken, which made him unable to withstand the loud noise, and fainted the next morning. The weapon was standing in the middle of the city, and the army, from another city, was called to take care of it. Only then did this squad realize that the government had known about this weapon for a long time. And he didn't want to send his squad to their deaths, so he wanted to launch a missile and get out of there quickly. But before they could even get close to the weapon, the entire squad was suddenly attacked. They were destroyed one by the weapon, and had to retreat. Most of the squad managed to escape safely on the plane before it was too late. And they had no idea what kind of terrible thing the government had gotten their hands on, at the Prime Minister's residence. The Ministry of Defense was quite worried, because that weapon not only wiped out the entire defense force of the capital, but now it had also wiped out the strongest squad in the country. If only the Ministry of Defense had been given orders to prevent foreign invasion, and not prepare for a weapon like this. And the Minister of Defense then decided to fire the defense cannon at the weapon on behalf of the Prime Minister. No one objected, so the cannon was quickly set up. But when the bullet was fired at the weapon, it suddenly created a shield to deflect the bullet, and then fired back at the cannon. The cannon was confirmed to have been destroyed. The old man and his subordinates all saw that this weapon was now invincible. It had proven that all the weapons in the entire country were useless against it. They believed that if other countries saw how powerful this weapon was, then the technology of magnetism would be developed even more. The weapon then started the process of recharging, and after it was done, it would continue to move. But the old man didn't care about those small fries, and he believed that this world that was created by the sanctuary was just a toy, and that the sanctuary was arrogant for creating this world without letting humanity know how this world worked, based on what principles. He wanted to abandon this world because it was preventing humanity from evolving and developing. But Naoto gave him the motivation to never give up hope. So now he wanted to destroy the very world that was controlling humanity. Meanwhile, Naoto woke up and saw Mary sitting in the corner looking depressed. She said that everything was over, and everything was destroyed, because that wave had magnetized everything, and gears that were magnetized wouldn't be able to move normally anymore. Rio was also holding onto her tightly, which made it impossible for Naoto to take Rio with him. Karasawa then met with the Prime Minister and decided to reveal her identity, in hopes that the government would listen to her and spread the situation. With their current forces, it was impossible to stop that thing. The Minister of Defense said that they should just nuke the entire city to destroy the weapon. But it was quite risky because this city was a network city. If it collapsed, then other places might collapse as well. Karasawa believed that since normal weapons couldn't attack that thing, then it must be using geomagnetic technology, which was supposed to be illegal based on the multinational agreement. And if something like that appeared in Japan, then there must be a big force backing them up. Some people started to nod, so Karasawa figured that geomagnetic research was something that many countries were researching. Meanwhile, Naoto asked if there was any way to fix the situation, and Mary said that if they just demagnetized everything, then everything would start working again. But the entire city was currently disabled, and they couldn't get out of here because the exit was blocked. Naoto didn't care and then proceeded to break the window and check the height and planned to use a cable to get out of here. He ignored the fact that his hand was burned and just pulled Ryu closer to the window. Even though he didn't know what he was doing, he didn't want to leave things like this. He would find a way to get out of here and demagnetize everything, and then he would find the bastard who caused all of this. So, if Mary wanted to help, then she should hurry up and do something. Mary didn't understand how Naoto could be so hopeless right now. She then looked at Hanta, and remembered how he had always been there for her, and helped her. She had always seen Hanta as an older brother or even a father figure. She removed Hanta's head and took it with her. And Hanta was surprised to wake up at this time. Naoto happily ran to him and picked him up and said that Ryu was still working fine. Naoto knew that Ryu was overheating because she was going through an emergency power-up process. Since heating an object is a pretty good way to heal, he could do it himself, but Ryudu couldn't. And Naoto had realized this, so he had taken Ryudu to a warmer area to heal him faster. Mary had never thought that Naoto could act so rashly yet so reasonably, and he was even willing to sacrifice his own arms for it. Naoto then told Mary to prepare to go out. The three of them would find a place to heal Ryudu, and Mary thought that they could go to the professor's master to do it. The three of them then went to a strip club, and Mary had never thought that the professor would choose this place as a meeting point. She then met the professor again with two hot girls on his arms. Despite the fact that they were all robots, he didn't want to waste any more time, so he called all three of them in. The group then had to go through an area that was very un-American, and the professor said that the robots he had programmed here were quite famous. The professor then took the group to his workshop, and said that this place was also a black market that sold things related to robots. He then told Naoto to put Ryudu over there and heal him slowly. Mary then asked him to fix her and, if possible, find 2 temporary heads for her to use. Naoto, at this moment, hoped that Ryudu would be okay because she had done everything she needed to do. Anko also felt sorry for Naoto's arm, but he said that it would be fine after a while. Mary wanted him to stop talking and heal his arm before it got infected. Mary also wanted him to stop calling her mother. Right after that, the decapitated head that Anko had picked up woke up. He was Val Mao, and when he woke up, he was very angry because he was in a body that was opposite to his gender. His dignity as a man was gone, but he was also quite surprised that Mary could connect a decapitated head to a robot body that had a completely different structure like this. Naoto also advised Val Mao not to provoke Mary because she was still angry, because Hanako still hadn't woken up. Mary then asked Val Mao about the giant monster that was with Mr. Muzi. But Val Mao said that she must have guessed it by now because everything was connected. Naoto knew that the thing wouldn't do anything. Because it had appeared in front of the government from the beginning, it had done what they wanted. In that country, the Prime Minister had asked for permission to drop a weapon of mass destruction from a satellite onto that weapon. But this would cause them to be condemned by other countries. If they had quarreled with others, and said that the army would solve the problem themselves. Even the army couldn't do anything. Val Mao said that the government and the army would destroy each other. The monster was still there. So it could be said that this was no longer terrorism, but a coup d'état. But Val Mao knew that besides what he had just said, the monster couldn't operate right now, because it was in the process of recharging its energy. It was expected to be able to operate again in 66 hours. Val Mao thought that Val Mao had seen the monster's blueprint. But he said that what they should be worried about was what the enemy was planning to do after the monster became active again. Mary was worried that they would start a world war. Naoto ignored Mary's worries and said that he would go out with Anko. He said that he had to do what he could. Naoto then disguised himself as a woman to go out with Anko and Mary. Anko wanted to experience everything she could, and Naoto would fulfill them. Mary wondered why he was disguised as a woman, and he said that he was being hunted because of the destruction of the previous tower. Naoto then constantly teased Anko. Anko also wanted to hold Mary's hand like a mother, but Mary still refused and didn't understand what she was doing here right now. Naoto then took Anko to a toy store and let her experience everything there. He then took a few pictures with Anko and then gave Anko a doll. He also noticed that there was a pair of rings there. Mary then realized that the people were still too carefree, and didn't know about the danger that was coming. Naoto and Anko didn't worry about anything either. Anko suddenly came to give Mary a ring that she had just found. Anko noticed that Mary seemed sad and helpless to the point of wanting to cry. So she wanted to help Mary fulfill a request. When Mary heard this, she said that if Anko could, she should destroy that weapon. She had accidentally called Anko a weapon, but Anko didn't mind. Naoto wanted her to stop talking like that. Mary just noticed that Naoto had lost his noise-canceling headphones. He said that he would find another one after he finished what he needed to do. That was to make the people who caused this pay the price. Naoto then said that he had just found a way to take over the city's main tower and clock tower. But Anko said that she wanted to destroy that weapon to help Mary. Naoto just learned that Mary had given Anko an order, so he yelled at her. He said that Anko was not a weapon, but his daughter. And didn't she have any self-respect to put such a heavy burden on a child like that? Mary realized that Naoto wasn't as reckless as she thought. It was just that she was too impulsive and hasty. Mary decided to leave and leave Anko with Naoto. Naoto said that Mary was a real genius. Although she worried too much, she was very reliable when needed. Naoto then returned to the world, and saw that Mary was constantly trying to fix redo. Val Mao said that Mary had been doing it for 4 hours. She was exhausted now, so Anko took her number and gave it to Mary. Naoto was also quite jealous that the one who fixed Ryudo wasn't him. Mary then asked Naoto to teach her some basic things, but Naoto didn't know because he fixed Ryudo by feeling, not by theory. Naoto then said that he had made a plan. He knew the tallest tower in Japan, called the Heaven Tower. And it was here. The Heaven Tower was the center of many cities, and Naoto decided to take it down. Naoto said that they had been wanted since the last terrorist attack. Then they just kept using this excuse to do whatever they could. It was necessary for the plan. They hadn't been heroes of justice or anything from the beginning. Mary said that they wouldn't have enough manpower to take over the tower. But he said that he had a way to get a new body for Hanako. Val Mao decided to join them, because he was willing to become a dangerous criminal, just to find joy. Anko also wanted to protect Mary at all costs. Naoto said that it would be fun to destroy something that someone else had built. But don't do it in real life. Getting punched is not fun. After 2 days of coma, Ryadu now woke up and went with Anko to the Heaven Tower to cause chaos. The soldiers tried their best to stop the two of them, but Ryadu's 2 blades and Anko's sword easily dealt with them all. But the two of them only destroyed the soldiers' weapons, and didn't kill anyone. While the two of them were fighting down there, Val Mao was sitting on the wall watching the situation, because his job was to sell information. Mary had asked Val Mao to join the battle, so he decided to jump down and told Mary to trust the body that she had put him in. Val Mao just rushed down and blew the heads off of every robot he came across. The army said that Val Mao was controlling them with the body of a doll. But Val Mao had charged into the smoke and climbed onto the largest robot, and easily killed the soldier inside. Val Mao had shot the soldier out of the robot, and he saw that Val Mao was right, that it was easier said than done. Val Mao had suggested taking over a heavy-duty robot to use as a temporary body for Val Mao. Mary said that it was impossible because the structure of a heavy-duty robot was very difficult to connect to. But Val Mao said that if it was Hanako, it would be possible because he had tried it before. But the problem was how they were going to catch a heavy-duty robot, so Val Mao left that to Val Mao. He then re-entered the robot, and went on a rampage against the other robots around him. He had originally thought that this robot would be compatible with Hanzo, but Mary had said that there was a different one that would be more compatible. That one was the black robot that Voma was currently targeting. The robot had shot off one of Voma's arms and one of his legs, but Voma quickly jumped up and stabbed his sword into the back of it. That was where the IS control unit was, so the robot would now just shut down, not explode. The group had never expected Voma to actually be able to do that, so now it was Mary's turn. Naoto said that they only had 30 more seconds before the enemy reinforcements arrived, so Mary had 30 seconds to transfer Hanzo's mind into the robot. Mary was still quite nervous because if she made even the slightest mistake, Hanzo would never come back. But Voma said that a person's life and death were decided on the battlefield. Hanzo would definitely wake up as long as he could smell the scent of battle. And there was nowhere more suitable than this place. So Mary then began to display an amazing speed as she removed the components and installed Hanzo's brain into it. But she still needed to program it so that Hanzo wouldn't encounter any problems during the operation. So Voma couldn't believe that Mary was human. But Ryu said that it was just the lower limit of what a human could achieve. At the very least, Mary was the first person to reach that lower limit so far, and the more Mary fixed it, the more she felt that her senses were becoming sharper. And every detail of the parts that she touched could be seen by her. Of course, Mary discovered that there was an anti-aircraft gun, and its speed wasn't something that Naoto could react to even if he heard it. She kept calling out to Hanzo to wake up, and right after that, Hanzo had already caught the bullet and returned fire at the anti-aircraft gun. He asked who had just shot at him, and Mary was happy that Hanzo had woken up. He was also quite surprised that he was now inside the body of a robot, and he had only just fallen asleep. And it had been a long time since he had slept so soundly. Naoto asked him how he felt, and Hanzo said that he was fine because Mary's technique was beyond reproach. Naoto then gave him a request, which was to destroy the remaining 1388 robots, and not kill anyone, in less than a minute. He said that it was too easy, and then he rushed forward and started firing wildly. Hanzo felt sorry for the soldiers because he had just woken up, and was in a rather bad mood. Naoto's group was then shown a news report about how the security forces of the Heavens Tower had been wiped out in less than a minute. And Naoto's image was shown on the news, and the next morning, Naoto was back on TV to scold the military for being too weak. At the same time, Naoto also used the Heavens Tower's power to threaten the military to stop them from attacking here. The government asked the citizens to remain calm and focus on evacuating. The crazy old man who was controlling that weapon had noticed that Naoto's group had taken responsibility for his actions. But he believed that the group wouldn't be able to guess what he would do next. Karasa now believed that he no longer needed to stay with the Japanese government. The professor then came to tell Mary that the government was planning to drop a weapon from a satellite to deal with that weapon. The satellite would be dropped in at 30 minutes. Naoto was now lying on Ryo's lap again, looking happy. It seemed that the king was only this tall. Anko wanted to sit on Naoto's lap, so he reached out his hand for Anko to lie on. Naoto was confident that he was the most powerful person in the world right now. Mary believed that if they could take down that weapon first, then the government would stop using the satellite. If you met Mary, you would see her rushing back to work and preparing for the professor, and the princess noticed that it had been a long time since she had seen Mary again. And she had also thought that Mary had really died at that funeral. Mary noticed that the princess was still wearing the watch that she had given her. Naoto was surprised that the two of them knew each other, and the princess said that they had met and gotten to know each other during the year that they had studied in Europe. But Mary had graduated in just 1 month. Mary said that if it hadn't been for the princess dragging her around, she would have only needed a week to graduate. The princess wanted to know what Mary planned to do with the Heavens Tower, and Mary said that the weapon had caused the entire city to become magnetized. So she would use the Heavens Tower to raise the temperature of the city to 200 degrees Celsius, to demagnetize the entire city. And the entire plan had been prepared by Naoto. And although Naoto was an idiot, he was an idiot who could solve any problem when necessary. The princess had realized that Naoto could analyze the entire Heavens Tower just by listening to the sound. But everyone seemed to trust Naoto, and the princess still felt that Naoto's existence was a hidden danger. But Ryu suddenly appeared behind the princess, and said that if she wanted to die, she only needed to take half a step forward. Naoto called out to Ryu to come back because she had let him hit her head again, and Anko had come over to help Naoto stop the pain. Mary then returned to her work, and she said that Naoto had done enough, and that she would take care of the rest. Mary was working when she suddenly saw Anko sitting in a corner looking quite lonely. She asked where the other two were, and Naoto was having a private conversation with Ryu. Mary felt sorry for leaving the little girl alone, so she called Anko over to help her prepare some things. Naoto had now taken Ryu to a flower garden, and Naoto noticed that Ryu seemed to be trying to avoid him. He made Ryu look him straight in the eye and she said that she believed that she had caused irreparable wounds to Naoto. But Naoto said that it was a medal for his stupidity, but she wanted him to keep punishing her for her uselessness. Naoto understood and asked her to close her eyes. Naoto then put a ring on her hand. This was the punishment that she had to accept. Whether she liked it or not, Ryu had to wear it forever. Because he had made this ring himself, Ryu was very touched and saw it as a token of love between the two of them. The military then arrived to take back the princess, and inside the tower, Mary and the scientists were still trying their best to finish setting up the Heavens Tower. Hanzo came to call Voma to go with him to eat, because the military was coming. The princess suddenly came to find Naoto, and said that she had something to ask him. The group sat down to talk, and the princess asked him if he wanted to destroy that weapon to avenge her, and he admitted that it was true. But she wondered why Naoto didn't just destroy the entire city and be done with it, and he said that he didn't want to harm innocent people. Hearing this, the princess was relieved because he was a very fair person, and she didn't have to worry about being blinded by the darkness. Ryu also noticed for the first time that there was someone who was more normal than Naoto, and that crazy old man still remembered Naoto. He said that he wondered who he thought he was, demanding to represent all of humanity to reclaim the right to evolve and develop. He still wanted to confront Naoto one more time, so he decided to remove all the restrictions so that he could control this weapon himself. Hanzo and Voma were still trying their best to hold on. Hanzo wanted Voma to stop talking and just fight, but he had run out of bullets, so he gave up. But there were still 30 minutes before the satellite would drop the weapon of mass destruction, so they needed to complete the final stage as soon as possible. Naoto was now feeling jealous of Mary's abilities. Suddenly, he sensed danger, and asked Mary to concentrate all the clouds in one direction. Mary didn't do it in time, so the group had to hurry inside. An artillery shell then flew straight towards the Heavens Tower. That weapon had fired unexpectedly, and Mary was completely surprised, because it was supposed to be several more hours before it would become active again. But it seemed that she had been wrong when she thought that the purpose of that thing was just to overthrow the government. That old man had contacted them and introduced himself as Genai. Naoto and Ryu recognized that it was the hermit who had abandoned the world. He had never been interested in overthrowing the government. Mary noticed the Tower of Heaven had turned red after one shot, and the professor said that the writing had begun to drop the weapon earlier than expected. But before it could hit the ground, Genai shot it down, causing it to break apart and scatter across the city. He wasn't going to let things end so quickly. He wanted them to try and stop him. At the same time, he wanted to see how far the resolve of the insignificant beings who lived underground would take them. Mary then wanted to fix the tower with Naoto, but he said there was no way they could replace the gears that had been lost after the shot. Mary was completely hopeless, but the professor asked Mary to keep hoping, because the last time they were in this situation, they had been hopeless as well, but Mary had kept hoping until the end. She said that was because a miracle, named Naoto, had appeared. This time, the miracle would only happen if both Ryudo and Anko worked together to stop the weapon. But Naoto would rather let the world be destroyed than do that. But Anko decided to do as she pleased, and went to stop the weapon herself. Naoto told Ryudo to stop Anko, because the cannon needed 72 minutes to charge again, so he wanted Anko to wait until the last 2 minutes before she interfered. Ryudo then took the order and turned to Mary, and said that Mary was right about one thing regarding Naoto, but she was also wrong about something regarding Naoto. Ryudo wanted Mary to think about those words and then leave. Naoto wanted Mary to stand up and do something, because Mary herself had said that nothing was impossible. He hated to say it, but Mary was a genius. A genius who had turned his strange ability into something useful. So someone with Mary's skills and knowledge wouldn't say the word impossible so easily. If Mary couldn't use what she had, then she should give it to him so he could use it instead. Mary didn't realize Naoto was jealous of her. She then kicked Naoto in the shin, and said that if Naoto had her knowledge, and she had Naoto's senses, then they would be able to fix the Tower of Heaven. But the professor wondered how they would fix the tower if they didn't have any gears to replace the ones that were lost. Mary believed that they could still do it though. Ryudo had temporarily stopped Anko, so that Naoto and Mary could come up with a plan. Mary then said that Naoto's senses were always right. So maybe the gear technology that they had been studying for thousands of years was what was wrong. Mary said that she had nothing to teach Naoto, because he didn't need existing knowledge. He could analyze things himself and figure out the answer. For example, if Naoto were to listen to a concert and thought it was bad, then how did he know it was bad if he had never heard it before? He said that he had to concentrate and analyze each sound in the music to find the flaws. And then when it came to making good music, all Naoto had to do was let the flow guide him, and he could analyze and process it. Mary then wanted Naoto to teach her how to use her senses again, but he said that she had already learned how to do that. He said that when she fixed the harmonica, she said that she was just doing what felt right. But was it really possible for her to fix something she had never done before in such a short amount of time? He believed that Mary had been able to see the outcome and worked her way backwards to get to that outcome. Mary realized that she was the opposite of Naoto. He could see the outcome but had to figure out the method. She could see the method and had to work backwards to get to the outcome. Mary decided that she would try and sense what Naoto was sensing from the Tower of Heaven, and she would analyze it to find a solution. Naoto let her experience it, and Mary was overwhelmed by the amount of information. Naoto then snapped Mary out of it, and believed that she understood everything he wanted to convey. The two of them then stepped into the repair device and were connected to a virtual space. Naoto worked with Mary to create new gears to replace the ones that had been lost. And Naoto believed that there was no way Mary couldn't do something that even he could do. Meanwhile, Anko couldn't wait any longer and decided to give the teddy bear back to Ryudo. Ryudo wanted her to come back to everyone, no matter what. Anko then jumped down and began to transform in order to carry out her mission. Naoto and Mary were now in the final stages of creating the new gears. Anko was now charging towards Jenny's cannon, and she believed that someone who had been created to destroy would be able to destroy this weapon. Anko then ripped a hole in the side of the cannon, and then used her sword to make the hole bigger. Jenny was still waiting for the last 3 minutes to charge up. Hanzo and Vamu tried their best to hold on and worried that they would die there. Hanzo said that if Vamu still had the strength to complain, then he was fine. Anko had now reached the room that housed the over 1,000 generators that were powering the cannon. But Anko's body was beginning to reach its limit, and she had to try her best to destroy as many generators as she could. Hanzo and Vamu had now retreated inside the base, and the enemy had begun to get serious and were willing to destroy the entire Tower of Heaven if they had to. The shot that hit the tower had caused Naoto and Mary's recreation process to be delayed a little bit, and in the worst-case scenario, they would fail. But it seemed that the two of them had no intention of giving up and were working even faster to make up for the damage that had just occurred. Jinai then declared that he had probably won. He said that Naoto was the reincarnation of the legendary Clockwork God, and he wanted Naoto to see despair, to see the helplessness and regret of those who had no power in their hands, to feel the same way that humanity had felt. But Mary then repeated the same words that Naoto had said earlier. Jinai realized that she was the fusion of the two of them, and said that no matter how much the two of them gathered the current humanity, he would not accept it. He then ordered the cannon to fire, but it suddenly stopped due to a power shortage. Jinai realized that this was because of his own machine. Anko had destroyed so many generators, but Anko's second battle form had run out of power, and caused her to revert back to her first form. But she said that if she couldn't even destroy this, then what was the point of her being created? Anko had lost an arm, and Mary knew that Anko had just bought them some more time. But Naoto didn't want to waste any of the time that Anko had created for them. Anko then charged through several generators and reached a control room, but this was the main power source, and Anko had to destroy it. But Jinai came up and shot a beam down from the ceiling, paralyzing Anko. He said that Anko's efforts had been wasted, and the cannon would soon fire. He was about to finish Anko off when she began to remember the happy memories she had with Naoto and Mary. Just as the beam was about to fire, Ryudu came to the rescue. She cut off Jinai's arm, and said that while Ryudu had received orders from Naoto not to take action, she still had a duty to protect her sister. Jinai said that even if he died, the cannon would still fire, but just then, all of the alarms in the base began to blare, causing Jinai to wonder what was going on. Ryudu said that she had finished what Anko had started, and at the same time, Naoto and Mary had finished what they had started. The Tower of Heaven had been successfully repaired, and Vamu and Hanzo came back out to tell everyone to retreat, because the army was about to arrive. Naoto said that their escape route was right in front of them, and all they had to do from there was make a logical decision. Mary said that she would just have to control the wind to make sure they landed safely. Hanzo was also able to land safely, so Naoto went ahead. Valma and Hanta followed, while Mary left the rest to the princess. The princess also promised to do everything she could to help Mary clear her name. Mary then jumped down with everyone else while Ryuru took Anko and left. Jinai did not accept this outcome, but the only thing he could do now was to go with the flow he had created. The Naoto group was then taken by a dragon, and escaped the Tower of Heaven safely. The group then returned to the professor's hideout to meet Anko and Ryuru again. Naoto was glad that Anko was not seriously injured. Anko was very sad, because she did not listen to Naoto and left on her own. So she could not destroy the core, which she was best at. Naoto then ordered Anko to say that she had tried her best, and wanted to be punished. Naoto then praised her, but Mary pushed him away and said that Anko had done a great job, and that she was now officially Anko's mother. Mary then asked Karasa to prepare a ship for her to leave here. Hanta also got a new body. Karasa was a little worried about this new experiment. But Naoto thought that this experiment would prevent them from being followed and escape safely. Everyone then came to say goodbye to the group. Soon after, the group arrived at the East Sea, and Anko was now healed. Mary quickly rushed to Naoto and pushed him away to hug Anko. Mary wanted to find Anko's next plan so that she could make Anko more perfect. But Naoto thought that he would be the one to fix Anko. Rio refused because she didn't want Naoto to wander around, so she agreed to let Mary do it. Mary also wanted Anko to say what she wanted to be called, but Anko didn't know how to answer. Hanta thought that they were being too harsh on the new mother. Valma had to interrupt the fun because a fleet was approaching them. Naoto knew it, and decided to face it, and seize a battle for himself, and the group was eager to fight. Because from now on, they will travel around the planet to fix it, and when they are together, they will not be defeated.